My name is Shuvajit. I work at Bureau of Economic Geology, UT Austin, and have been using AASPI tools, working with Sumit Verma at UTPB formerly, and now he's at Endeavor on some of this structural geology aspects using different kinds of seismic attributes. So today I'm going to show you some of the applications of this curvature and aberrancy and how they can be better suited than other attributes depending on the geological conditions. And what we found out in this specific area that we have a few sets of faults that we could not really interpret on the traditional coherence attributes. And knowing those fault distribution was important because in those areas, the faults and the associated fractures can enhance the permeability. And so knowing those the reservoir properties associated with the faults and fractures are important, and therefore we need better tools and better algorithms to analyze and image those. The study area is from the North Slope, Alaska. I spent a couple of years there, and so again, there are this Prudhoe Bay oil field where these 3D seismic surveys are from nearby that area. And the subsurface geology of the North Slope is pretty complicated, especially for the deep subsurface. It's because of multiple episodes of tectonics, faulting, and all that. We used two 3D seismic surveys, and these 3D seismic are publicly available from the Alaska Geological Survey and from this link. And so we use two surveys, really large 3D, around 1,000 square kilometers, and the nominal fold varies between 40 to 60. And these two 3D surveys are around 10 miles apart from each other. And we applied the same set of algorithms on both of these 3D to see how and compare and contrast the attribute expressions as well as the fault styles. Does it vary from one region to other region? And the Prudhoe Bay is right between these two fields. So here is a workflow. We had to do some sort of phase rotation and other things on the 3D seismic, and then we interpreted the horizons on one side, then computed the attributes like deep, magnitude, azimuth with the GST algorithm, the gradient structure tensor that was helpful for adjusting tilting surfaces, coherence attributes as well, computed coherence with energy ratio coherence, and the curvature, and then the aberrancy, azimuth, and magnitude. And then we extracted all these attributes, the volumetric attributes on the Shublik, the main geological horizon that we studied here, and then try to interpret the fault styles. So here are two seismic sections from these two 3D, Storms 3D and the North Shore 3D. So these two surveys are around 10 miles apart from each other. And then this is the amplitude section. And when you're looking at this, the number 1, 2, and 3, these boxes, we zoomed into those areas to see what kind of faults and other structures we can identify there. For the S1 or the N1, we can see some offsets right there. But for S2, we see a little bit of little gentle flexure from S2 and N2, right here or even here. But for the S3, from this amplitude sections, we don't really see it's very invisible flexure or offset. And that was interesting. And so we looked at this time structure maps of this horizon, the Shublik horizon, around 2200 milliseconds. We tracked this, and then we are mapping this. If we look at this time structure map, then we start seeing this type of segmented system. And the segmentation is along multiple orientations, like along north to southeast, and there are some orientations along northeast, southwest. So we start seeing some of these things on the time structure maps, and that indicates that there is some lateral change in the fault patterns, but there may not be much change in the vertical patterns. What I mean by that, the offset between some of the faults are very minimal. So we started with this coherence attribute. So first we computed some of these attributes in AASPI and then transferred those results into Petrel. So here for the regular coherence or the energy ratio coherence attribute, we could see only one set of fault, the red ones here. So we have seen a really large normal extensional fault here with a throw more than 100 feet. So we could identify those types of faults here. For the other one, the yellow ones here, we could identify those when we change the scale from the default scale to we change the scale by a little bit more because is most of the areas it was showing high coherence. So we changed it, then we started seeing some of these basement structures. These are reactivated over times along west northwest orientation. But then for the other ones, the blue ones, the S3, we could not really, those are barely detected. We could not really detect those features. And with this attribute, really looking at the, the ratio of the coherent energy with with the total coherent energy, right? And then we could not really see these structures on this coherence attribute. So then what we did, we started looking at the other geometric attributes that included curvature and aberrancy. And in this case, aberrancy was useful from multiple different standpoints, from looking at the fault intensity, knowing the cross-cutting relationship, which fault was older or younger than other faults. And so, and the aberrancy of flexure, this is basically measures the lateral change in the curvature along a surface. It's a third order derivative, was developed by Marfut and Chi back in 2018. And then Haibin D and Dengliang Gao, they did a simpler mathematical formulation of aberrancy of flexure attribute in the publication. So looked at the deep azimuth modulated with the deep angle, and then we start seeing this different fault orientation along along northwest southeast, then west northwest, as well as this pink or this purple color faults along northeast southwest. We could not detect those faults previously on the coherence attribute. We looked at, and then we started. Then we moved a step ahead with the with both most positive and most negative curvature, and there we could see all this. We could identify these faults, these three styles of faults: north to southwest, north southeast to west, and along this orientation. And then one of the parts that was still not clear to us, which faults are older than other faults based on the cross-cutting relationships that we geologists use to know which faults were reactivated later than other faults. And that's the time the aberrancy attribute was useful to an extent. So unlike in curvature where we got K1 and K2, in aberrancy we got three different aberrancies, like your maximum, minimum, and the intermediate aberrancies. So when you look at the three individual aberrancies, we could not really tell much of the differences. But when you combine them together, like a total aberrancy magnitude, then we could detect some of these changes and tell which faults came after which faults, right? And so here what we are seeing, based on this, we found, of course, we identified all these three styles of faults that are present, and is validated by the regional geology, because over time there are three rifting events that happened here. You could identify all of them here, but also we could tell different types of abating relationship, we call in structural geology, like single tip abating, double tip abating, like which faults cross cuts other, which faults remains concentrated within two fault segments. So we did this thing here in both of these data sets, and then we ran an track on the top of the aberrancy, and then came up with this with this fault orientations. Mainly you have these three orientations. These are the ones that are oldest faults along west northwest, that were reactivated multiple times over the history. And then these faults came the pink faults, and then these north south faults are the youngest faults. Now, we wanted to know how the structures varied over time. So we looked into the deeper structure near the basement. And here with these attributes, as you can see, these are mostly linear along west-northwest, along the deep structure. But if you go move up, like in the Shublik, as I showed you, then we can see these multiple different fault patterns, and that indicates your reactivations, change in stress directions, and all. We did the experiment with convolution neural network a few years ago, and that was based on just the seismic amplitude data and some of the labeling we have done on a 2D CNN. It was not a 3D CNN at the time. Based on that, well, we could identify some of these faults on a plan view, and we extracted the fault patches from them, but the results were not as good as we found out from the physics based, like the aberrancy and other attributes. So the idea was then we use this aberrancy attribute themselves to train the CNN instead of the seismic amplitude. So let me conclude this thing here. So we compared and contrasted these attribute results from two different 3D seismic in the same geological regime, and we found out that for a certain styles of faults with a minimal offset, we could not really visualize them on a coherence attribute, but we could interpret them using curvature and aberrancy attributes. So in certain situations, these attributes can be helpful. And we think the structural inheritance has a large role in the fault development. And this is the example of I was talking about this type of different kind of type abating relationship, like single tip abating, double tip abating relationships, so that we could identify based on these aberrancy structures. We have published these work in the ACG conferences and other journals, and these are all available online. Thanks to the Alaska Geological Survey, DGGS for donating the seismic data, and AASPI for the tool and funding. And thank you to you all.